Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our CPD webinar today. My name is Jenny Storskog-Terp, and I work for the Education Department in the RCVS. So I'll be hosting this webinar today together with Tim Hutchinson. Do you want to introduce yourself, Tim?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tim Hutchinson. I'm a veterinary surgeon, managing partner at Larkmead Veterinary Group in South Oxfordshire.
Great. And we also have my colleagues from the comms department, Deborah and Joe, who will be taking care of all the practical bits today. But let's get started. Our focus today is to talk about CPD that takes place in the workplace. And I'll start with just going through some of the practical bits, the CPD policy and the RCVS requirement. And then I'll hand over to Tim for the more interesting part, which is him talking about all the great CPD that you can do in the workplace. I'll then give you a few tips of how you can record it, and then we'll focus on your questions. So we have received quite a lot of questions as part of the registration process, and most of them will cover as we go along, but we will also dedicate quite a lot of time at the end to answer questions. But if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box and Joe will collate them all, and we'll just answer as many as we can at the end of the session. So let's start off. So CPD, it's all about lifelong learning. It's about continuing to improve your knowledge and your skills and maintaining them. The veterinary world changes so quickly, so it's so important to stay up to date so that you can provide the best service or care for your clients or patients, because there's always going to be new drugs, new technology, new research, or other ways to communicate, for example. So that's why CPD is so important. And as I'm sure you know, the CPD requirement is mandatory as part of the code of conduct. So veterinary surgeons need to do 35 hours per calendar year, and veterinary nurses 15 hours. But the RCVS doesn't dictate what type of CPD you need to do. You're all professionals. You know what learning needs you have and what format works best for you. So it's all about thinking about what's best for you and how the best way for you to learn it, in what format you feel works best for you. But as long as you stay on the RCVS register, whether you're a veterinary nurse or a veterinary surgeon, you need to comply with the requirement. So it doesn't matter if you're not working or if you're working part-time or in not-for-profit organization. As long as you're on the register, you need to fulfill the minimum requirement. So CPD should be relevant to your role or future aspirations, for example. So it means that if you're not in clinical practice, you don't have to do clinical CPD. It should be relevant to you. So, but also, even if you are in a clinical role, all of your CPD doesn't have to be clinical. CPD should be relevant to you as a professional. And I know from talking to many veterinary nurses and surgeons that are struggling to meet the requirement, many of them are only recording the sort of the formal CPD courses or webinars and not thinking about all the great CPD that they're undertaking every day as part of your work. And I think that might have to do with either not recognizing the learning opportunities or not knowing how to record it. So hopefully this webinar will help you with that. And we have as part recording portal is one CPD. It's available as a web version and as an app. And if you use that, you'll see a lot of categories that might help you to see the wide range of CPD activities you can count. So we have the formal, which is more of the thing you think of, like for CPD courses, congresses, or in the last year, distance learning. There's also self-directed CPD, so reading, research, which can be a great form of CPD as long as it's recorded. But also, there's also the subcategory workplace-based CPD. So learning and development doesn't have to take place outside of work, as I'm sure you're all aware of, and it does count towards your CPD. You don't have to go on a course in order to meet the CPD requirement. So I will now hand over to Tim, who'll talk to you a bit more about his approach to CPD and workplace-based CPD.
Thank you, Jenny. Just looking back over the last 30 years, when I graduated, there wasn't the same formal requirement, or certainly no requirement for 35 hours of CPD logging. And that came in the early years that I was in practice, and with it, the old paper record cards for recording it. And it's strange that we're now in a situation where there's so much learning opportunity out there that there's a misconception within the profession that actually we're only learning if we're not in our practice and somewhere else learning from other people in a lecture theatre or in a practical wet lab somewhere. And looking back at those 30 years, obviously we were learning things 30 years ago without going on courses. So we must have been doing it in practice. And that made me think, well, what really is CPD? And if we think, we hear CPD all the time, we're so used to the acronym, but continuing professional development, continuous professional development, it's something that's ongoing. It's something that we're doing on an ongoing basis. It's not just a pick up and leave that's separate from our work. It's part and parcel of our day-to-day activity. And professional, so it's anything that is relevant to what we are doing as a professional person within our careers, not necessarily clinical. There's nothing in that actually says it's all clinical CPD. And development, it's us learning and going on. I often joke that we call it veterinary practice because we spend a career trying to practice at what we're doing and then eventually give up and retire when we realize that we're never going to get there. But it's all about ongoing development. And so on that basis, what really is CPD? And the way that I often speak to the staff in my practice to think about it is that if you can do something today that you couldn't do yesterday, or you know something today that you couldn't do, that you didn't know yesterday, and if those things are relevant to what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis in your career or in your career going forwards, then the process by which you got from A to B is CPD. Now, it may be that CPD was involved with taking part in a webinar or in a lecture theatre or in a seminar, but actually a lot of that is what you do on a day-to-day basis and learn from your colleagues. So just looking at this reflective cycle that's there on the screen in front of us, this is how we learn, this is how we develop. We have an experience, we do something, and then we reflect back on that experience and think about what we've done and conceptualize those reflections until we can decide that we're going to plan to do something differently next time we come to do it, and then do it again and keep going around that circle. And this is CPD. So the whole point about what we're doing is the reflection aspect to it. We could go and sit in a lecture theatre and be given a certificate at the end of it and feel that we've achieved CPD because we've got a certificate that said that we spent an hour learning about something. But unless we're really reflecting on what we've listened to and then planning how we're going to put it into practice, that really hasn't been worthwhile CPD. And yet we're quite glad to recognise that and put it on our CPD records. But the real stuff that we do in practice, somehow we don't seem to recognise and put on our CPD records. So if there's going to be a surgical procedure that we haven't attempted before, we know how to perform surgery, we know that we are capable of that surgical procedure, then we're going to be doing it for the first time. We will need to plan in advance what we're going to do for that. And that planning is CPD. When we've performed that surgical procedure, We'll then reflect on it and how did it go? Which bits worked really well? I'll make a note of those. Which bits perhaps didn't work so well? Why didn't they work quite so well? And make a note of those. What can I plan to do differently next time? And then next time we have that procedure again, we can then put in place these plans and then review them and reflect on them again. That's CPD. It should be on our record cards. And in fact, as the younger you are in practice and the more recently graduated, almost everything that you're doing on a day-to-day basis could be classed as CPD, because when you're first starting out in practice, everything is new. So I think CPD is less about what we're doing and it's about how we're thinking about it. It's about the reflecting on the activity. So it's not a separate thing from what we're doing as our jobs. It's part and parcel of our job. But the key thing is that it's that reflection and planning and moving forwards with it. And I think the other lovely thing about this reflective cycle is that there are so many opportunities in there for involving other people. We may have mentors in practice. Graduates will have vet GDP advisors. And at every stage around this reflective cycle, you can involve somebody else. So if you are doing a procedure for the first time, you can have somebody there watching and interacting with you. When you're reflecting afterwards, you can reflect with your advisor how things went and use your advisor to help you plan for what you're going to do next time. But that doesn't just have to be limited to the vet GDP graduate phase. It's a good way of developing a habit, but it's something that we can carry on throughout life. And I know that so many practices will hold regular clinical meetings, discussion groups, mortality, morbidity rounds. And these are all opportunities for discussing and reflecting and planning what we're going to do next time. And in such a way, then this is really the CPD itself. In terms of, does this all have to be clinical? No. So we've all had these consultations where they really haven't gone as you wanted them to go. You've been discussing with a client what your plan of action will be, and really the consultation hasn't gone where it wanted to, or a consultation where the client left the room with a bad feeling. Again, that's something that we've done. We can reflect on that in itself and think about what went on. We can, again, conceptualize this, put it into different contexts, speak to other people. How might they have challenged it? What could we have done differently, and plan for how we would have that consultation again next time. Difficult conversations that we're going to have with people, difficult phone calls that we need to make. Again, how we approach those and what we do with them are all part and parcel of CPD. And if we're going to make this a really worthwhile thing for lifelong learning, then linking it into an appraisal system, I would hope that everybody in practice has at least an annual appraisal, and hopefully opportunities throughout the year to touch base with mentors or employers about how you're developing. But setting yourself a plan at that appraisal, where am I now in my career? What do I need to achieve over the next 12 months? And then planning ahead for some of that, and whether that's learning it in practice or whether it's needing to go out of practice to learn it from somewhere else. But we have at our fingertips a massive resource, which is all the clinical cases that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, all the interaction that we have with our colleagues and with clients as well. And these are all CPD learning opportunities. Jenny, I think we have some questions that were posed in advance.
Yeah, I'm just going to show quickly how to record, just give you some tips for how to record your CPD, and then we'll head over some questions. So hopefully that's my phone. And So we've been mentioning One CPD quite a lot today. So that's our recording portal. It's available both as an app as a website. And we did some webinars in December last year for new users and more experienced users. So I'm just going to show you quickly how to use the plan and record session, but you can refer back to those webinars just to get a more in-depth demonstration. So in the planning section, you're able to add objective, you can edit your objectives. So as I said before, an objective doesn't have to be something you do for the next year. It could just be that you want to review evidence for diabetes. And as Richard said, using your phone, you can just dictate into it rather than typing if you want to. So I'll just, on my phone, is next to the space button, I'll just press the microphone. Review evidence for diabetes. And then I'll just do that. And you could put a description, but sometimes it's I think it's enough with the title. And a due date, again, is not, you don't have to put it there, but I'll give myself a week, confirm, and then save. So then it's saved here as part of my objectives, and you can see I don't have any time recorded against it yet. So now you've added an objective or a plan, and it takes you less than a minute. So it is something that's really quick to do. And then to record it, it's just the basic information, the topic, the duration, the date. You can put a start date or an end date if you want to. And then the activity types, this is what both me and Sue have been talking about, the formal, the workplace-based, and the self-directed. So there's a list of activities under each subcategory, but we also have other. But don't worry too much about the categories. You can always add some information in the note section, and you don't stress about making sure that you always get the right category. That's not the most important thing. And then you're able to link it to an objective. So that's how you'll record the time in the objective side. So you could just link it to anything, or you can also press the plus sign, there, and you can create an objective here, which will then be saved in your plan section. You can add notes, and you're also able to add a attachment. So, for example, a photo, a voice note, or anything like that. So if you have a certificate, you can take a photo of that. You might have some notes, or you want to take a photo of slides, for example. If you're going to a presentation, you can use One CPD as your learning journal, not just an app for recording your hours.
Okay, so Tim, the first question is, what specific workplace activities can count as CPD?
Hopefully, as I illustrated in that brief introduction, really anything that you are doing that makes a difference to your day-to-day life as a professional person. So if something that you are doing and you're reflecting on it, you're going to be doing something differently next time, and that's going to help you progress, then it is CPD.
Thank you. How are we to find time for CPD after a long, tiring day at work? Does your workplace have to give you time to complete CPD?
I think one of the key things here is that we should try and get out of the habit of viewing that CPD is something that is always separate from our day-to-day work. There are certainly examples where CPD is separate from our day-to-day work. If we do need to go on a course, attend a seminar, take part in a wet lab training exercise or something, but a lot of CPD is part and parcel of what we're doing. So it's really trying to integrate it into your everyday life. The One CPD app that's there, I mean, we all carry these things around in our pockets all the time, and apart from posting pictures of cats on social media, playing the piano, or hurling abuse at each other, we're missing a golden opportunity because it's there at our fingertips. And if we can just log something that we do, actually, I've just noticed something differently that I've been doing. What was it that I was doing differently? How have I done that differently? How am I going to use that again next time? And just punching that into the One CPD app, and it's there and parcel of it. So at the end of a long, tiring day, there probably shouldn't need to be an awful lot to have to do with that.
Thank you. Is time spent teaching a student classed as CPD?
I think the honest answer is it can be. If again, it's something that if you are teaching somebody and learning yourself something in the process, so that then next time you're teaching somebody, you'll be using that to help that next student, then it is CPD. You know, just because it isn't clinical doesn't mean to say it's not CPD. So, you know, we probably castrate dogs on a very regular basis. And the first couple of times that we castrated dogs, there was a lot of CPD involved with them. After that, it isn't. The first couple of times that we're training students, there's a lot of CPD involved with it. But there may then be other techniques that we can develop for training students that will be new things. And again, that's all CPD.
Do you have any advice on recognising and encouraging CPD opportunities in the workplace for some team members who might not be thinking about CPD in the way you're describing?
I think it's all habit forming. And what I would suggest to anybody on this call is, you know, spend 5 minutes at the end of the day today. Is there something different that you have done today? Or is there something different that you're going to do tomorrow as a result of what you did today? Because if there is, then you're developing, and that's CPD. So it's not a case of trying to look for specific CPD opportunities as things that are going to come along that are different from what you're doing day-to-day basis. It's part and parcel of what you're doing.
We've just had a question to you, Tim, that has been submitted. If you learn a small nugget of new information, how long would you record this CPD for? For example, 10 minutes, an hour, etc.
I think the key thing with that is the length of time that you are sort of reflecting on it. You know, what did I notice about that new nugget of information? What did it mean for me? What should I do with it and plan for next time? And that's the key time of that CPD. It's just the same as going to a lecture. So you spend an hour sitting in a lecture theatre listening to a lecture. You may record an hour of CPD, but actually the really useful time is the time that you spend afterwards thinking about what you did in that lecture and planning what you're going to do with that afterwards. So time itself, I don't think we need to get hung up on absolute amounts. There's so much out there, so many opportunities out there that really that 35 hours you notch up very, very quickly, even if it's in small parts.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you, Jenny, now. The first one is, are certificates required for in-workplace CPD?
No, and I think this is something why people feel a bit insecure recording a CPD that takes place in the workplace. I always get the questions, how do I evidence my CPD? And the best way to evidence your CPD is to reflect on it. Reflection is much more valuable than adding a certificate to your CPD record. So you don't need a certificate, you just reflect on your CPD, and that's the best evidence that you can provide.
Thank you. How do I log practical experience that I gain in the workplace that is part of working towards a CPD objective, such as improving a certain practical skill?
Yeah, so if you use one CPD, you'll see in the subcategories there's workplace-based CPD, so you can choose one of them. And if you feel that they don't quite fit in, there's the other one, and you can just add that and record it. And if you think anything is missing from one CPD, just let us know and we can try to incorporate that into the categories. But don't worry too much about the categories. It's more important that you do the learning than you record it in the exact right category. You can always add some information in the text boxes.
Thank you. And then we've got a few questions about what counts as CPD, Jenny. So yes. The first one is, does research for current cases count as CPD?
Yes, of course. It's a great form of CPD.
Does reading journals count as CPD? And is there a limit to the number of hours that reading can be recorded as CPD?
No, there isn't. I think this goes back to 2016 when we changed the 10 hours ad hoc CPD requirement, where you couldn't no longer have just 10 hours ad hoc reading. What we said was you can still count reading as CPD, and it can be an excellent form of CPD, but you need to add some evidence. So now using one CPD, you can just reflect on it, and there is your evidence for reading.
Thank you. Does teaching surgery count as CPD for the teaching vet?
Yes, as Tim said, as long as you're learning from it, then yeah, it's CPD. And you know, it might not just be what you're doing there. If you did any preparation for it, that can also count as your CPD.
Do keep in touch days count as CPD?
Yes, as long as you're learning from it, then you know, it's not just about, it's maintaining your skills and improving them. So keeping in touch days can be great forms of CPD.
And the last one, Jenny, for you. I live in Canada, but would like to keep my UK license. Do you know which CPD can be used towards both licenses?
Well, I don't know about the requirement in Canada, but the RCVS requirement is very flexible, so it doesn't have to be CPD that you undertake in the UK. It can anywhere in the world is fine. You just need to record it in English using the One CPD recording portal, but you don't have to. The CPD itself doesn't have to take place in, you know, be in English.
Thank you. So back to Tim for a couple of questions now. Does doing something new that you've learned about count as CPD, e.g. dental radiography is new to our practice? I've done as much online training as I could find, but I find I learn most by doing it.
Absolutely. And with something like that, there's a massive amount of CPD involved. So from deciding, oh, is this a thing that we're going to move into, understanding how the equipment works, what you're going to do with it, learning how to use the equipment, learning to interpret the x-rays that you're getting from them, that is all CPD. If it gets to the point where you're no longer having to think about what you're seeing and reflecting on it, then it stops being CPD. But certainly for when you're starting using it and planning to use it, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I had a lot of one-to-one mentoring, surgical and clinical practical sessions with my mentor, both in theatre and outside, during my 2 years of new graduate programme, which have been important for my professional development. May I report them as in-house CPD? Again,
absolutely. And certainly going forward now with the Vet GDP, there's so much recording of this activity through the Vet GDP portal, which automatically becomes CPD going forward. So for graduates entering practice now, they don't need to be looking for an additional 35 hours on top of the Vet GDP. That is all part of it.
So Jenny, a few questions back for you now. Do I need a minimum number of hours of in-person CPD, not online?
No, so we don't specify what type of CPD you have to do. 35 or 15 hours is the minimum, but most vets and nurses will do considerably more. But you don't have to do, you know, 10 hours of webinar, 10 hours of courses. It's up to you. You're professional, you know what works best for you, and as long as you keep a record of it and reflect and you feel that it's beneficial to you, then it's good CPD.
Okay, the next question, what are the CPD requirements during maternity leave, especially if I'm off for a year?
Well, it depends. You first need to consider if you want to stay on the register. So if you are a vet and going on parental leave, you can choose to go non-practicing. Then you don't have to worry about CPD for that time. And then you can come back on the register at any time. If you're a veterinary nurse, you can temporarily remove your name from the register and then restore when you want to come back to work. If you feel like if you need to stay on the register, you can either then choose to just do informal CPD, you know, keeping in touch days will count as CPD, or you can also go into the web version of One CPD to pause your CPD for up to 6 months. And that's not only for parental leave, it can be for illness or for anything else that you feel like you're struggling with CPD or you need to take some time away from work, and you can apply for a pause.
Thank you. Are there designated people at the RCVS that check everyone's CPD records? Do we have to make our CPD public if a client asks to review it, for example?
We do CPD audits, so if you're included in an audit, you'll be contacted and we'll ask to review your records. Other than that, you don't have to send them to us on a regular basis. And yeah, your CPD record is personal to you. It's up to you if you want to share it with your employer or anyone else, but they're personal to you and no one else will have access to them.
When does the CPD allowance restart every year?
So yes, so the CPD year is a calendar year, so it's January to December, because I know it's a lot of confusion when both vets and nurses do the renewal, if it's March to March or November to November, but it's January to December. So when you do your renewal in March, you are confirming that you met the requirement for the last year, for example.
Thank you. And then Jenny or Tim, I'm not sure, you might be able to both give your perspectives on this. How do you record research and writing work when it's done on a consultancy basis under a confidentiality agreement and can't be disclosed?
I mean, I can start. I think just focusing on the learning and you know, not go into too many details is what you don't have to put all the details in your CPD, just focus on learning and reflection, really. I don't know if you have anything to add, Tim.
Yeah, I think the key thing is the reflecting bit. You can reflect on a lot of that without needing to divulge any information that was within it and break any confidentialities there. It's more about learning the principles of things, really, reflecting on that.
Tim, if we stay with you, I've got a few questions that I think would be great if you could answer, please. How should I set effective goals that are not too overwhelming?
Good question. Being realistic, really, and time is a fixed thing. We've all got the same amount of time, but we can all do different things with that time. We've all got different challenges and different things going on in our lives. So I think we just have to be realistic on a personal basis. What do I want to achieve? Can I achieve that in the time that I've got available? Is it a realistic goal for myself? And break it down into small chunks.
Thank you. Do you have any tips for new graduate RVNs on selecting CPD? I'm hoping to hone my general skill set this year and I'm struggling where to start.
New graduate RVNs. Again, there's no difference really from what we've been talking about with vets with that. As an RVN, you've got opportunities with loads of cases going through practice to learn from, and the team around you to learn from as well. So again, it's all the new things that you're doing, all the new things that you're learning. What are you doing today as an RVN that you weren't doing yesterday as an RVN? And again, that's CPD.
So we're moving now to some questions we've had submitted during the webinar. The first one is, I found many web pages with CPD webinars which were recorded. Can they be counted towards my CPD and how do I record them?
Yes, I can answer that. Yes, of course they can be recorded, and you just then use one CPD and put in the topic, the type of activity and the time, and then reflect on your learning and if that has any impact on your behavior or you as a professional.
So Jenny, you may be able to answer this one too. It seems that I can't record CPD for the same topic twice. I'm frequently building up information about the same topic.
Yeah, I've been discussing this with our developers. You can either choose a different topic or if you want to, you can add to the topic that you first recorded, but it is something we're working on. And I know that at the moment you'll have to put like one at the end of it, for example, just to be able to record it. But I'll highlight it again to our developers and see how we can resolve it.
This is quite a broad question. Based on your definition of CPD, how do you quantify CPD in terms of hours if it wasn't a seminar or a workshop or a conference?
Do you want me to tackle that one, Jenny? I think the key thing is just being honest with yourself about, the time that you've spent thinking about it and what you're going to do with the information that you've learned from it. So there'll be so many 5-minute snippets of CPD throughout a day, and quick reflections, that really it's just a case at the end of the day of sort of notching those up, or at the end of the week, or whenever you add them into your record. I think we've become accustomed to going on courses that count for a day or several hours or whatever, and so we're used to putting down big chunks. But given that CPD is about ongoing development and isn't something that we pick up and put down, it's there part and parcel of our everyday lives, a really good 1 CPD record would look absolutely deluged with 5-minute snippets of information.
Yeah, I think it's about thinking about the time when learning takes place, whether that's the actual learning or the reflection, and then recording that, and use your judgment. There's no one is going to call you up and just in question if you spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes doing that. We do trust you, you're professionals, so use your judgment and think about the time when learning takes place, and that's fine.
Thank you. Is there a maximum number of hours in total that you can log as workplace CPD?
No, there's no limits on types of CPD. So as long as it's beneficial to you, then all your CPD requirement can be workplace-based CPD.
Do reading publications and reports also require reflection in our CPD record?
Yes, I think from next year, reflection is mandatory as part of the CPD requirement, but I think it's something that you do anyway. You reflect on what you're learning, and if you're not used to using 1 CPD, it's very easy to reflect, so you don't have to. Reflection is not a long essay for you to put down your thoughts. You can either use the prompts in 1 CPD that guides you through the reflection process, or there's a more flexible approach, so you can record an audio note, for example. So that could be, if you like to reflect with others, you could be over a cup of coffee with a colleague, or you can do it yourself and just talk into your phone, or you can use the dictate button, for example, and dictate, which makes it really easy. So there's no extra paperwork at the end of the day, and you can enjoy other things than reflecting on your recording and reflecting on your CPD.
Thank you. If a vet doesn't meet the 35-hour CPD requirements in a year, can they make up those hours?
So we no longer have the rolling requirement that we used to, where there was this, 105 or 45 over 3 years. So if you don't meet the requirement over 1 year, then when you do your annual renewal, you'll declare that you didn't meet them and the reasons for it. And we're likely to contact you then as part of a CPD audit. But you can still renew your registration and just need to have a plan for what you're going to do in the next year to make sure that you meet the 35 or 15 hours.
Thank you. If I registered 2 weeks ago, do I still need to take 35 hours of CPD, or is there a reduced number of hours?
Yes, so the requirement is calculated pro rata depending on when you joined.
Thank you. I presume this all applies to vets in industry as well as vets in practice. We have a lot of workplace learning and training, but it isn't all clinical.
Yeah, absolutely. As we said, whatever is relevant to you as a professional. So a lot of in your role, for example, might not be even, there'll be so much more than just the veterinary learning. It'll be reading lots of guidelines and legislation and things like that. And I know, especially in COVID times, we've learned so much in the last year that some of them we might want to forget, but we didn't think about before. So absolutely, it's thinking about holistically as you as a professional, what's beneficial to you, and then you can record it as CPD.
And staying with you, Jenny, are there any plans to increase what we can attach, for example, photos and documents to the free reflection area of the 1 CPD app? It would be useful to be able to include notes just by taking a picture, for example, to record information in one place, but the limit of 3 attachments restricts this facility.
It's something that we are keeping under review. Please send us the feedback so that we can have it and review it as with our IT team. There is a cost and the resource implications for having more storage, so it's just getting that balance. But if you feel that it's something that would be really useful, it's something we can take forward and review again.
And there's an opportunity to feedback within the One CPD platform, is there, Jenny? To send
Yeah,
feedback?
so there's a little contact button or an envelope in the app, and just contact us and it'll get the feedback straight to us or our development team.
There's a point that has just come in. It would be useful to have a more structured reflective area on the One CPD app. Further advice on how to set objectives and link these would also be beneficial.
Well, we have there's 3 prompts that you can use that guides you through the reflection, which is how did the CPD relate to your plan? What are the key things you learn, and what impact will it have? Which is the main points of reflection. So you can use those 3 prompts within One CPD or the free reflection. I don't know if you have any other advice, Tim?
Not particularly, no. It is all habit, and I must admit I'm the worst person at doing that. My CPD One CPD app isn't as populated as it should be because I keep forgetting to go into it. But I blame that on age and senility, and that there are younger people out there who are far more adept with technology and far better at it. But I think it is purely habit for me.
There's one remaining question that it might be a little bit specific, but I'll ask it anyway. I'll be working as an OV in a non-clinical setting for the first time. Do you have any suggestions on what kind of workplace CPD I can do, apart from improve international courses and OV conferences?
Tim, do you have anything?
Working as an OV in a non-clinical setting for the first time. Well, basically, if you're doing something, if you're working in whatever way, shape, or form, if it's in an OV non-clinical setting for the first time, you're doing a lot of what you will be doing will be new. So it's an ideal opportunity for using that as CPD. If you're doing things for the first time and you're having to think about what you're doing and reflect back on it so that next time you do it, you're going to be improving what you're doing and changing how you're tackling things, then again, that's CPD. So just because it isn't clinical doesn't mean to say that you can't use exactly the same process.
Jenny, we've got a point that has just come in. It will be more useful to have access to One CPD via a PC rather than just the app. Would you just like to confirm?
Yeah, so One CPD is available as the web version, so you can go to our website and then you can access One CPD on the web or on the app, an app. So you can use either, you can use both. It's up to you. So you don't have to use the app if you don't want to. You can just use the web version of One CPD, so it'll be on the computer.
And just to clarify, the login is on the top right of the RCVS website, so you can log in that way.
Yes, exactly. Thanks.
And it looks like we've covered all of the questions that we've received. I don't know if anybody has anything further to ask. Oh. I had an injury in 2018, which kept me out of work for 3 months, and another 3 months in 2019. I've just recently started working in the UK as a vet again. There was an important lack of CPD hours in all of that time. Would that be a negative for me in my records?
I mean, it's going back quite a few years. So I think the most important thing is that you have a plan for making sure that you're up to date now and that you're doing what you need to do. But if you have any concerns, just contact us, cpd@rcvs.org.uk, or give us a call and we can talk about your specific situation.
I think that's just one final point, Jenny, to thank you for letting them know about the guided reflection section. They've just found it and it's going to be really useful, I think. So
okay, excellent. I'm really sorry about the one CPD demo, but we do have 2 demos on our website, so you can find it there. And there's one showing planning, recording and reflecting. So there's lots of information there. So hopefully that will be useful.
And Jenny, I can send them the links in the follow-up email.
Great.
no more questions coming through. So I think we've reached the end of those.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for attending today, and I hope you found it useful.